Today, let's make a pocket scarf. I've actually been working on a series of patterns for them. Here are some of the versions, and they will appear first in Country Knitting of Maine News and Views magazine. Later, I will compile all the versions into a book. This is the one I will demonstrate today. Very simple on a bulky machine. 4 stitches, 6 rows per inch on number 4 yarn. The written pattern includes multiple gauges, but we'll knit one here today. And some of you may be able to manage that on your mid-gauge machines. I'll show you 2 different ways to attach the pockets. And in another video to follow this one, I'll show you an easy way to knit on a hood. To make the demo easier to film, I'm actually making a reduced size of scarf and hood. Some sharp-eyed knitters will spot the discrepancy between the stitch and row counts I tell you and what I'm actually doing, and that's what it is. I'll be giving you the normal adult size stitch and row counts, though I'm knitting a 3/4 size scarf. A total length of 60 inches is a good fit to make the pockets fall in the right place for most women. If you're knitting for somebody taller or shorter than average, or have a special place you want the pockets to fall, simply add or subtract rows. The scarf is 8 inches wide so that the pockets will be nice and roomy. Knitting the main part of the scarf is super easy. Simply cast on using either E-wrap or chaining around the needle shanks. 66 stitches. Knit 360 rows. Bind off using any neat method. Here I'm binding off around the gate pegs and trying it to stay out of your way so you can see the action. But if you are a new knitter and want to try this, I have whole videos on the subject that will help you more. When snipping the main yarn after binding off, leave a really long yarn tail and thread it into a yarn needle so that we can use it to create the seam that's going to run up the center back of the scarf. Even though it was knitted flat, we will double the fabric to create a tube. In the pattern, I have allowed 1 stitch on each side to be consumed by the seam. Any neat seam will do the job, but I am mattress stitching, working next to the edge column of stitches. It's a little bit of a bother to manage the lengthy yarn tail that we left, but it means fewer ends to weave in later. So work all the way up the length of the scarf, completely seaming the edges together. When finished, center the seam on the center back of the work and flatten the scarf. Check the entire length of the scarf to make sure there's no twist. It's important that the center seam not go all the way around the scarf and come back. We need it to stay flat. So once you're sure that the center seam on the back of the scarf is centered on all ends and all the way down, baste the ends of the scarf together so that we can treat them as one piece of fabric for the next step. Do this on both ends of the scarf. Cast on the pocket across 32 stitches using either E-wrap or by chaining around the needle shanks. Knit 36 to 48 stockinette rows. What we are doing here is knitting the pocket from the top down. So what will become the top edge of the pocket is now hanging down, and we're at the bottom of the pocket. Hang one of the doubled ends on the same needles that are working. Hang it with the seam in view. We'll do this for both ends, so in both cases we'll be working either behind a cast on or a bind off, and the goal is to get that whole cast on or bind off on the tool, so the tool is behind it, in other words, and hang all of that on the needles. It is a little bit stiff, but it works fine. So now the bottom of the scarf and the bottom of the pocket are hanging, and the right side of the scarf and pocket are away from us. Bind off the pocket, simultaneously seaming it to the scarf. Expect it to be a little bit harder than usual because the needles have to pull through all those layers, but it is not really problematic. It's just a little more challenging. When you reach the far end of the work, do leave a long yarn tail when snipping the yarn and pulling it through the last stitch. because we can save a spare yarn tail if we do this and use the lengthy tail we're leaving to seam the pocket to the scarf. Using this method, the cast on or bind off is at the bottom of the scarf, and we'll trim the top edge with worm trim. Then we will sew the edges of the pocket and the scarf together. To make the worm trim with the purl side in view, hang the first little bit of the pocket top on 3 needles, knit 6 rows, find the next little bit of pocket top, push the tool through it, lift them onto the same working needles, knit 6 rows, and sew on all the way across the top of the pocket. For the worm trim, we use 3 stitches at a time, and our pocket stitch count is not a multiple of 3 stitches. So we're not going to come out with a perfect end of the worm trim, and it really doesn't matter when you get to the end. I ended up with a tiny bit of extra fabric, so I just kind of squeezed it together and popped it on the 3 needles and bound off. You'll be astonished, it really doesn't show up. Again, leave a long yarn tail because we will use it for seaming. You may use any neat seaming method that you like to join the pocket to the scarf fabric. I like to begin by knotting the first stitch and then whip stitching the remainder. Sew both sides of the pocket to the main fabric and then pull out the basting yarn that held the layers together. The alternate way of doing the pocket is to hang the doubled edge first. That's instead of casting on, and knit the pocket rows up from that edge. If you choose to do that, hang without the seam in view, so the smooth side is towards you, and knit 38 rows rather than 36, and then the bottom seam will be hidden between the pocket and the scarf layers. In this case, we'll bind off the top edge of the pocket and then work the worm trim onto the bind off in the same manner as the other way. In this photo, the knit the pocket first method is on the left, and the knit the pocket onto the scarf method appears on the right. This is the scarf we have at present, and the next video will show you how to turn it into this. Another great scarf design is the keyhole scarf. Here's my keyhole scarf collection book. These can't get lost very easily because they lock into place. I will put a link to the sale page in the program notes.